All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Here's Johnny.
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
The power of Christ compels you!
This is my boomstick!
What's your favorite scary movie?
Good evening, and welcome to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. We are your hosts.
I'm Daniel DeBona.
And I'm David Ulloa, and we are back after a week off where I was on vacation, and then we tried to reschedule, and then my 2-year-old was he did not want to cooperate with the rescheduling, and so we are starting
as 2-year-olds tend to do.
as they tend to do. So we are starting our month of the vampire as we continue our year of the monster. Just a week late, but that's okay because I think that we're here with a rather good and interesting one. So in a section that we're talking Enter the Vampire, we are talking about a fairly recent, so we're talking 2021 vampire horror comedy starring the incomparable Barbara Crampton, Jacob's wife. So I'll also mention I'll marry her, but I'll mention Larry Fessenden right off the top too, because this really is both their movies. So Daniel, what did you think of Jacob's wife?
So this was my first time not only seeing this movie, I'd never even heard of this movie before. I think you had one time like offhandedly mentioned it on an episode of Geek More when we were doing like movie vampires. And so, but I had no idea what I was in for this. And so it starts off and I'm kind of like, okay, like I don't at all really see where this is going. Seems kind of scary. Then it immediately pulls back from that, and it starts to seem kind of funny, and then it starts to seem kind of dramatic, and then it's a little bit of this, it's a little bit of that. I liked this movie. I'm remarkably on the fence about which way I'm going to go. So I've very much been looking forward to this discussion. This movie has a lot of redeeming qualities. It has some great performances. It has an excellent portrayal of vampires. It has a couple of pitfalls in some things like pacing and some things like that towards the beginning. But overall, I did enjoy this movie. It had a camp to it.
Yeah.
That felt very classic horror. It almost felt Dark Shadows-y in its portrayal of kind of how everything went, which I found interesting. I'm a big Dark Shadows fan. So I was really I was back and forth with it a lot. Ultimately, I do like this movie. I think it brings plenty for us to discuss. I am interested in how I'm going to rate this thing at the end, because I'm not even 100% sure how I'm going in, but ultimately I did like it. I think it's a fun watch, and I think there's a lot to talk about here.
I think that you represent the majority of people when it comes to this movie, because if you check out this movie's ratings, IMDb, it's got a 5.5, so that means that it's pretty split down the middle. Google users 53%, again pretty split down the middle. Its Rotten Tomatoes score is fairly high at 85%, and Metacritic is I'm not going to call it low, but it's also not high either. At 59% for a horror movie, that's pretty high for Metacritic.
Right.
It's very easy, I think, to watch this movie and not know how to feel about it, because the movie is a lot of things. For one reason or another, this movie really resonated with me. And I'm pretty sure I said that on that episode of the Geekmore podcast that it was one of my favorite movies I had seen in a little while. And I think that mixing the although feminism is not a new thing, mixing that sort of progressive and I guess less traditional literary quality with and critical quality with the more traditional representation of vampires that we see here,
Right.
and the traditional backdrop, like the setting that we get, you get a really nice mix of themes here, and I think that that resonated really well with me. There's also and I called her uncomparable, Barbara Crampton. I've been in love with her since I can't remember when. I don't know a life where I wasn't in love with Barbara Crampton, because I don't know how long ago I saw Re-Animator, and from that moment on, I was a fan. Not just of like her beauty, because she's gorgeous, but also like her talent. Like, she is really funny. She's
Right.
incredibly funny. She's incredibly talented, because if you see a lot of her movies, like, she plays different characters in every movie. This is not, a sort of like how people say about Harrison Ford, that he plays the same character in every movie. And I disagree with that. But I can understand where they're coming from. Barbara Crampton's not like that. Like, every character is subtly different, and she brings something new to the role. And I think that she and Larry Fessenden just like knock it out of the park. I also love that this movie doesn't go the route that you think a feminist work would,
Right.
where it's, the husband is this guy that is holding his wife down and never comes around. And I think that while that works for most feminist works, I wouldn't have liked it here. And I think that Fessenden does such an awesome job of showing us what I would like to believe, but more than likely, it's not true. Most guys are like this, where it's
Right.
like, no, fuck, I didn't realize I was, holding my wife back. I didn't realize that I was doing all this shit. Let me support her. Let me be for her the kind of spouse that she is for me. And I love that sort of message that this sends. And if it can do it while balancing horror and comedy and drama, I feel like this is the kind of movie that would have existed in the 70s.
Right.
Much more likely to exist in the 70s. I don't know if you saw that movie, The Holdovers, that was nominated for a couple Oscars.
Yeah.
It doesn't play like a modern movie, because it's funny and it's sad and it's emotional and it's drama and it's everything all at once. And you don't find a lot of that these days. And I feel like that's maybe why people don't know how to feel about this movie, because it's not stock, it's not standard, at least not these days. And it's also not big budget.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of easy to be like, oh man, well, those effects were awesome. And although the effects I don't think are bad, they're definitely not awesome. They're over the top, I think, in the right way, in the camp way, but it's not the kind of movie that I think is very easy to get into.
Yeah. And so as we talk about how easy it is to get into or not to get into, let's get into a section that we're calling I, Vampire. The story of Jacob's wife is not unheard of in the vampire genre. Somebody who is kind of unwillingly turned, not sure what's happening, has to decide whether to fight against or embrace this new, interestingly enough, presented in this movie as a lifestyle almost of being a vampire. And so, I mean, take us through this story. What you've hit on a lot of the high points of what this movie is. How does this movie, the story within this movie, sell those things?
I think that the reason why this movie works is because this goes back to what made the original vampire story so good, which is it's a story about love. And that's what Dracula's about.
Right.
If you've never read Dracula and you've only ever seen the countless movies that have come out, and each one moving further and further away from the source material until you get to, the Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Coppola Dracula, you lose all of that. But this is a story about, a man who's got everything except love. And no matter what he does, he'll never find it. He's got to force it on people. And that, I think, is what this story is really about. That this story is about two people who don't know why they're in love with one another.
Right.
And that as they rediscover why they're in love with one another, rediscover their strengths, that they both have value, and that their relationship matters. And I think when you look at horror, it's very easy to kind of go towards that, like, Lovecraftian, like, well, I'm tiny, I'm insignificant, I don't matter. But you matter to yourself, and you matter to the people around you. And when a story kind of puts that message out there that, like, hey, listen, you do matter, and don't take yourself for granted, and don't think that just because you've had a rough couple of years that you don't matter anymore, and that you can't possibly matter anymore. I love that line where she says, I like who I've become.
Yeah.
That's such an amazing, powerful line. And I think that if you read enough feminist literature and you watch enough feminist movies and TV, you'll come to see that that's really what feminism is about. It's about empowerment. And for anyone who feels disenfranchised, that's the most powerful thing that you can give someone is a voice.
Right.
And I think that the master's role in this movie of simply giving people the ability to take control, that's what Dracula was really about. It was about a man being able to take control of his own life, because he was the foreigner in a foreign land, and wasn't given the respect that he deserved, and so therefore he took the respect. And that's very easy to kind of gloss over. When you think of Dracula as a monster, it's really easy to do that. When you think of vampires as monsters, as the things that violate, and they do, right?
Right.
It's really easy to gloss over but I'm taking power back. And when you make the master a woman, when you make all the vampires women, it accentuates that aspect of the monster, and it turns it less about the monster and more about the reason. Everyone asks, how does the vampire bite? But no one asks, why does the vampire bite, sort of thing, you know? And I think that that's something that this movie explores through the lens of feminism. And it does it in a beautiful, beautiful way that I think can resonate with everyone. Because if you've never felt like you were powerless even once in your life, then you've never really been alive. Because like, everyone has felt that at some point. You could be born the richest person in the world, but at one point you had to listen to someone, whether it was your mom, your dad, an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, a nanny, somebody. You had to listen to them, and you had to do what they said, or you didn't get, I'm not going to have your pudding unless you eat your meat, sort of thing, and this movie gets at that. And so even if you haven't felt that in a long time, this movie's great at reminding you that, like, hey, there's a whole army of people that feel this constantly, that feel this all the time. And by the way, women feel this all the time.
Yeah, what's interesting about this movie is when it first starts rolling and you first kind of start to get into this, it has the feel and the look too, which I think was done on purpose, of like a lifestyle movie, like a lifestyle channel movie, right?
Mhm.
Like that's kind of like the way the lighting happens and the way the characters are presenting themselves, and it feels, like you said, it feels low budget, but not in a bad way. It just you're just kind of like, okay, you know what's happening here.
And it is what it is way.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And so you kind of sit back and then you start to get this storyline of a woman who obviously, feels she doesn't feel like there's anything left in her marriage. You get the scene of her laying there next to him snoring and she can't sleep. He's barely paying attention while she's explaining something she's very excited about. He doesn't even look up from his newspaper while he eats his breakfast, and she immediately mentions this ex-boyfriend that she's going to be doing some business dealings with. And you're like, okay, I see where this is going. And the beginning of this is very much a lifestyle made for TV movie. Lifetime, not lifestyle, Lifetime.
Yeah, I figured this.
Yeah, made for TV movie. And so you're watching this thing and you're trying to figure out at what point does it become horror, right? At what point does this thing earn that moniker? And so it makes that turn very quickly as we watch the guy attacked by the crate full of rats, and you're getting all these spooky sounds and stuff when they're inside this old mill. But then it takes a really interesting turn into dark comedy, into a story of, like you were talking about, figuring out who you are, becoming empowered to be what you've always wanted to be. We've got this story of a woman who ends up with the guy that nobody thought she'd end up with, right? Because he was just some dude and he was just there for her when one of her parents died. And so, he was there for her, and it just kind of evolves. And you get this. I work in a small town, and not that Tuscaloosa is a big city or anything, but I see this type of stuff a lot. You just see people who they've just known each other their whole lives, so they end up together. Right. And sometimes it works out, and sometimes it doesn't. But you start to get the feeling that this is going to be one of those times when it doesn't work out. So you're trying to figure out why is this happening? That was me. Like, I'm watching this going, why is any of this happening on my television screen right now? I'm trying to watch a vampire movie. And so I'm sitting there watching all this. It finally makes that turn into horror, and you get this really interesting journey of self-discovery. While we're sticking with the Lifetime movie references, you get this idea of a woman finding the power within herself to be something more than just a preacher's wife, which is all she's been until this point, and is the name of the movie. Her name's not in the movie. She is absolutely the main character, but this thing isn't called Anne. It's called Jacob's wife, because she, until that moment when she embraces what has happened to her, like you were talking about, that's all she was. That's probably what everybody in this town knows her as, which blows her ex-flame, I believe her husband called it, blows him away. That this is all she is now, is, oh, you're just a preacher's wife. Like, how did you end up with Jacob? That's crazy. Where's that girl I remember? And you see this happen so often in movies and TV show, in life. People go through this phase, they hit that late teens, they go to college, they start to discover who they are, and then a lot of times you just see people fall into that road that's plowed for them of, okay, well, yeah, but now I've met this guy and he's got a good job and now I'm his wife. And that you see women who this becomes their entire identity. And so what we get out of this movie is a woman who finds a new identity after becoming a vampire, which ended up being remarkably fascinating. And I kept thinking that as I'm watching it, I'm just going, okay, wait, no, this is cool. Like, because there was, man, about a third of the way into this movie, I was like, oh no, like, I know Dave loves this movie, and it's all going to come apart at the seams when we go to talk about it. But as it rolled on, and I started to understand that theme that was happening, the theme of Anne figuring out who she was, even if it's because of this terrible circumstance of becoming a vampire, she's now understanding what it is to be an individual, which is something it seems she hasn't had since high school.
Right.
And that journey of it is, one, just interesting, but two, it's fascinating that somebody who is bitten by a vampire by someone called the Master, and now it's kind of dragged into this coven of type thing of vampires. That is what drove them to find their individuality, which is a really weird thing, because so often in vampire movies, it's get bitten, serve this serve your sire until you're big enough and bad enough to where you start siring your own, but it's all just furthering the race and sticking to the rules. You got to do XYZ. That's how it's got to be. And so it was interesting to see this become the idea of someone finding their place in the world upon becoming a vampire. And that is what ended up selling me on this movie. So that's kind of where I started to turn the corner. And then some of the kills, some of the special effects, the stuff like that we get are, like you said, they're not blow you away great unless you're a fan of camp. And if you love camp and you're okay with camp being in a movie that's not completely campy, but it's not accidental camp, you could tell that they just did what they wanted to do. You look at these kills and you start to just it becomes this joyous thing. Man, when she goes to the dentist and he was like, let's brighten those teeth. And I was like, they brighten teeth with UV light. This is going to be
what
bad.
An awesome moment.
And I got so fucking excited. I was like, yes, this is going to be great. I can't wait to see how this goes down. And then they put the thing on and she ends up with this giant burn on her mouth. And it's like, it's just enough. She kind of freaks out and goes slamming past all these dental hygienists in the dentist office and stuff. And I was like, yes, that's the type of stuff I need, because it was funny, but it was dramatic too, because you could tell she was in pain, and it's not like they were playing, the yakety sax in the background or anything. So you're kind of laughing at the situation because it's like, dentist, vampire at the dentist, that's humorous, but then you see her get scarred, and she's Barbara Crampton just kills it and just knocks this scene out of the park. And it's things like that that just make this movie so much fun to watch.
There's you mentioned one of my favorite like little moments, and I think that might be why this movie resonates with me so much, beyond all the stuff that I talked about, the themes and all that. It's a beautiful collection of little moments of incredible acting, and we're gonna get to the actors in a little bit, but the scene where she's really excited because it's her job to do something with the mill, right? Thematically, this is perfect. She's the one who is revamping the town, and her husband, who is the preacher, is like, well, they're going to be changing the traditional thing here. That mill is a staple of the town, and blah blah blah. Beautiful. It works on every possible level. But the thing that you pointed out about how, he says, oh, your ex-flame, there is not 1 ounce of fear in him that she's going to do anything, because he doesn't think of her or consider her at all.
Right.
She does not register for him as someone to be considered. She has no desire to do anything.
Right.
He doesn't even think of the mill project as something that he should be excited for her about. It's just that thing that you're talking to me about.
Yeah.
It's such an amazing moment, because we're seeing for the first time, because it's the very first real interaction that they have with one another. We're seeing for the first time that there's a problem there, because you might be able to pick up on it, and you should pick up on it, that she's sitting there in the church and he's preaching this sermon, and she kind of looks kind of dead in the eyes, and he cuts her off when they're talking to the parishioner. What was her name? Damn, I can't remember. The first vampire we end up seeing.
Right. Yeah.
Whose mom is doing poorly, and she's back on the sauce and all that. So we get hints that there's problems there, but maybe they're having an off day. No, we know at that point, there's a fucking problem here. She has her own life and she has her own desires, and she has not been able to do anything with this. And he is so unworried about her meeting an ex-boyfriend, that because typically that kind of guy is the kind of guy who's like, nah, you're not going to do business with your ex-boyfriend. What the fuck are you
Right.
talking about?
Your handsome, vastly successful, and wildly wealthy ex-boyfriend.
Right. But that's not him, because in his eyes, it's like, why would she? She doesn't have desires. She doesn't have her own goals. She doesn't have her own motivations. She's just my wife. That's all she is. So it's this awesome moment where we see right there, and they both show us there is an ocean between these two people, which makes later, when they reconnect, all the better. And I think that the approach to the master, which you were building on, that is fantastic, because the dynamic between, or at least how it's presented, of why a like a master vampire exists in this movie is totally different to the way it's typically presented, because the vampire ultimately, like the master vampire, ultimately represents the big bad, and
Right.
the person who must be defeated for good to triumph. That's the way it's presented in just about any vampire movie. They must be vanquished. And that's not the way it is in this movie. I believe, I have almost nothing to go, off for this, but I believe that she would have killed the master.
Right.
However, it should have been her decision to do so. And that line at the end, she was like, you took the choice away from me. It was my choice to make. Man, what a fucking powerful line.
Yeah.
Because in the end, he's doing the thing that they both set out to do, that they agreed upon. It's like, hey, this is what we're gonna do. We got to stop her, because, like, this is not good. And he's the one who does it.
Right.
He doesn't allow her, and it's her. Man, what a fucking awesome moment. And that's the thing, is that this movie's made up of incredible little moments. They're almost like vignettes in the life of a vampire. This could be presented as a collection of short films. And I think that it would still possibly work, because what we have is an amazing collection of moments where we see women either succeed or have succession taken away from them, and it's awesome. It's great.
Yeah. I mean, and they do a lot to. One thing that's interesting is, while we're exploring the idea that she's finding herself, and in a way kind of finding her humanity within this new role as a vampire, what's interesting is they never let that take away from the fact that, as a vampire, she is a savage killing machine. When the blood starts flowing in this movie, dear God, does the blood flow in this movie, man.
It is gory.
Yeah, like their special effects budget had to have been a hefty chunk just on fake blood. I mean, this movie provides blood by the gallon, and it's pretty fucking awesome. When she kills the dude in the house, and because he comes and she ends up just destroying his neck and shredding him, and I mean, and it's just everywhere. And after this whole thing, then we just get them like having a casual conversation as a married couple while they mop up the blood, because he's realizing, well, this is still my wife, I guess. He doesn't go the whole Van Helsing route of like, now I have to kill you because that's just the way it is. He now starts to see her, possibly because she's a threat now. He now starts to see her as someone. She is someone. She's not just Jacob's wife anymore. Now she is Anne, and he starts to respect her. And by doing so, and in doing so, has to respect what she is now, because she's still the woman that he fell in love with and pledged his life to. She's just a little bit different, and maybe we've got to find a way to work with that.
Yeah.
And so you get all of these things just kind of packed in there. It turns into one of those movies where you're sitting there going, I don't know if this should work, but it does.
Right.
And so you end up with just a lot of, like you said, a lot of little moments that it's easy to pick apart and be like, man, that one was good and this is cool. But they do string them together well enough, because ultimately Anne's story is what matters here, more so than killing the master, more so than her making out with her ex-boyfriend and having a shitty marriage, more so than any of those little things that we've been talking about. Her story from beginning to end is what ties all this together. It is the opposite of so many we've talked about, where it's like the story only exists because it has to, because they've got to fill 90 minutes. No, the story in this movie is what makes it matter. It's what makes it interesting. See, I almost don't know if your point of this being a collection of short films would work, because I think if you remove that element that brings it all together into one, then I think you're just left with some fun kills, a good special effect, a couple visual gags, and then you're out. I think that the story here of Anne from beginning to end is 100% necessary for this thing to matter.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with that. I think more what I meant was that the presentation of that story, where like
Okay, so it
this
could have done
is
it like Acts, like a Quentin Tarantino thing.
yes,
There we go.
almost like that, where if it had been a TV series, it could have been a mini series, and each episode stood on its own.
Okay, I
Where
get what you're
we
saying
get
now.
like the beginning of Anne, the middle of Anne, the end of Anne, and then you have all these stories in between that matter.
Right.
And I think that's more what I meant, is that every story and every moment here matters, and the characters feel like real people, and their problems feel like real problems, despite the fact that like the movie ends with police officers saying, how are you going to write this up?
Yeah.
You know, like that's a really comedic thing for this really outlandish event that's just occurred, and yet it feels real.
Right.
It's strange, but I think this leads us into, as we talk about, you know, Anne and characters and the importance of their stories, into a section that we're going to call Preachers and Parishioners and Police. Oh my, because alliteration is fantastic. So we have what I think is a fairly large cast for such a small budget movie. Granted, the movie hinges on two characters, but within that, there's a lot of side characters here. Who kind of stuck out for you?
Well, one not really worth talking a lot about because he didn't give a lot to the story. Just stuck out because of who he is. CM Punk is in this
I knew
movie.
you were going to talk about it.
I mean, I'm like 72 hours off of WrestleMania, right? So CM Punk fresh on the mind. Have a love-hate relationship with CM Punk throughout the years. Currently, after this most recent WrestleMania, I love him right now. I think he's selling everything. He's doing very well. He did what he had to do in this movie. That's fine. The character that I would like to start out talking about, if I'm going to start with side characters, is Giovanni Cruz as Mariana Alamin. In the beginning, we see her get abducted. That's fine. She did the great, scared woman gets taken by a vampire thing.
Mm-hmm.
Holy fucking shit. It's a vampire. Was she awesome? Oh God, she's terrifying. And this is one of those things that, not to the extreme of what was that movie we did a while back, Stigmatism, not quite to the level of that when it comes to like contorting her body and stuff like that. They actually got a contortionist to do that movie,
right?
But the way that she moves, and like she's got like the whole new metal head tilt thing in full effect, and the talking and the constant plural pronouns, everything is we. She was terrifying. I mean, shit my pants terrifying. She scared the hell out of me when we got her as a vampire. And we're going to talk more about the vampire specifically in this in our next section. But man, that was the first time when we got a real glimpse of what vampires in this continuity are. like in the wild. This is what they become. And she just killed it. She had this really bizarre posture. Her speech was broken and manic, and the effects and everything that they put into her face to make her look like a monster were incredible. But she sold everything I was looking for in a vampire in this movie. That moment is when I knew there was no way that when this was over, I was going to say I didn't like it, because when I got my eyes on her and how insane that performance was and what these vampires were, man, that was scary. And that's when I was like, okay, like, let's see. I'm ready to see where this goes now, because I need more of this.
That's how I felt about Naisha Bell as Amelia Humphreys.
Yeah.
When we first see her, because we haven't seen her since she, disappears, and it's like, hey, where's she at? When we first see her in the mill, and her eyes are bloodshot,
right,
and she is not to use the term that they don't use for her, they use for Anne in the movie, but she's not the church mouse that we see earlier.
right.
The meek woman who's like going to others for help. Like, nah, she's going to do it herself. It was scary.
Yeah,
I think that the horror in this movie is real. I think that it is very good. I think it's handled well, and balancing camp and horror is something that I think doesn't happen as effectively as you'd want it to often.
Exactly, because it's either usually you're leaning way in, which I'm here for,
yeah,
or it's campy, but they didn't want it to be. That's just how it came off, and then that's always just kind of sad.
Right. And I feel like either of those is easy to do. And for all that, I mean, we sung the praises of Return of the Living Dead on the last episode.
Right.
Return of the Living Dead is a horror comedy. That's and there's lots of camp in there, but it's not a scary movie.
Right.
There's great kill effects in that movie. There's but it's not horror first.
Correct.
And it's really a comedy that happens to have zombies. And this, I think, it's equal. It is 50-50. It's camp, it's comedy, and it's horror. And it's both of those at the same time, because like the things that she says are funny in a dark way.
Yeah.
And the way that she laughs about it, it reminds me almost of like Joker in The Joker,
right,
or Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver, where you're laughing, you know that you shouldn't be laughing because this person's insane and this person is not the good guy, and yet somehow you're maybe still rooting for them. It's weird,
right?
It's a very weird feeling that it brings about in me when I see that sort of stuff, and I think that she captures that so well, because there's really nothing different about her. She's wearing the same clothes, her hair is exactly the same, and yet there's something in the way that she's carrying herself. There's something in the way that she stands. There's something in the way, definitely, they pitch change her voice. They add all sorts of different intonations in there, and that adds another layer of horror there. But man, did she blow me away.
Yeah, just amazing. And so from vampires over to humans, I mean, we've got to take a look at, we spent all this time when we're talking about the story, and yes, obviously this is Anne's story, but man, Larry Fessenden as Jakob was just incredible. Now, if you're hearing the name Larry Fessenden and it means nothing to you, when you watch this movie, you're going to go, oh, that guy. Because Larry Fessenden is the perfect, that guy. This guy's filmography is longer than I am tall. And most of them are just like guy in background or voice on radio or, something like that. But this guy has made a ton of movies.
And most recently, Killers of the Flower Moon,
which I have not seen yet, but
yeah,
I've heard great things.
He's a radio DJ in Killers of the Flower Moon.
So yeah, so this guy he's been everywhere, and he's made a good amount of horror on TV. He was in The Strain on FX, which was when I saw him, that was the first one that popped in my head because I loved The Strain. But he's in this movie. He gets an interesting, unexpected arc because, like you said, it's the one that we always hope a male character is going to take in a movie that's about a woman discovering her self-worth and all of those things that get you Oprah's stamp of the month on your book, right? But
yeah,
he actually does it, and not because he's dragged kicking and screaming, but because he realizes it's the right thing to do. And we watch him grow as a person. Whereas with Anne, we do see her evolve, but we really probably just see her become more her truer self. And she's given that opportunity. That door is open for her. With Jacob, we actually see him change as a person. His very first lecture is all just big dick in about how important it is to be a husband. Sermon, I guess is the more proper word. But it's all just him out there just swinging it, talking about how important it is to be a good husband because you're the most important thing in the world. And everything about how you are as a husband is everything that you're going to represent as a person. And you kind of find out that while Anne is so wrapped up in this idea of that all she is Jacob's wife, he is so wrapped up in this idea that he's just a husband. And in the beginning of this movie, doesn't matter to him. She could have been anyone, just as long as he had a wife, and he got to go around dropping that word husband and talking about how important it made him, and how big his balls swang because he was married, And by the end of this movie, we've got a guy who is respecting his wife as an equal partner in this relationship, as someone that he understands the error of his way when she says, "You took that choice from me." And he's remorseful. He understands why she's so upset, and has then come face to face with probably how often he's taken choices away from her in the past, because now it's happened in such a dramatic fashion. And now she's got the balls to come out and tell him about what he's done, and he has to face these things. And we end up getting this character in Jacob who makes miraculous strides in character evolution until the very end, when he's just like, ride or die. This is how we do it now. You're a vampire, I'm a preacher, let's go. And he's good with that. And it's not just you're my wife, it's you're Anne, you're a vampire, you're your own person. And I'm Jacob, and I'm a preacher, and this is my thing. And he finds a level of individuality that exists outside of this one role that he'd come to accept. And he finds a level of humanity in Anne when he starts to see her as another human being, not just an object that he's collected in his past.
That's, I think, the perfect way to describe his character, and it's why I find his character so endearing. I think that I'm a fairly realistic person, and that I can look at myself fairly objectively. And
I'm not. I'm a massive narcissist.
Who do you identify with in Lord of the Rings?
Oh God, as much as like I want to like give some sort of big dick answer, right? But the God's honest truth is, like, I look at that and I'm like, I'm probably fucking Boromir, right?
Okay, see, this is the point that I'm trying to make here. I look at myself and I'm like, I'm Boromir. I'm Boromir, and I know I'm Boromir. I'm the guy who will do the wrong thing for the right reasons, and then turn around and be like, "Fuck! I should have just done the
damn.
right thing for the right reasons." And now I've got a fucking quiver of arrows stuck in me,
and just a tree trunk plowing out of my chest here at the end. Yeah.
That is, I think, why I love his character so much, because as human beings, we're gonna stumble, we're gonna fall, and I think if you're a good human being, you're always gonna keep that trajectory of moving forward and not going backwards, not staying stagnant, because that's not good either, but moving forward. And you're gonna stumble, you're gonna fall, and you're gonna pick yourself back up, and you're gonna be like, all right, let's try this again. It's gonna
Right.
be better next time, but there is gonna be a next time. And that's I it's such a real representation of the character. And Fessenden is he's so good at being average. Like, that sounds bad, but
Right.
but it's really not meant to be that way, because like he's portraying something like Tom Cruise could never play average. He
Right.
can't.
No.
He can only play the best at what he is. And if it's a pimp like Risky Business, then yeah, that's he's the best fucking pimp. And if it's a secret agent like it is in Mission Impossible, then yeah, he's the best fucking secret agent. He's never just like, yeah, I guess we'll call him because the other guy's not available.
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
he's never that. And Fessenden can do that, and he can do that well. And that's he's real.
Yeah, he's real. There you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's real. And it's not an unbelievable evolution that we get out of him. You can see somebody just actually realizing the errors of their ways and changing to become a better person, which is, a fascinating turn, especially in horror.
Yeah. 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 And especially when you put him next to his wife. And she's who I'm going to talk about as my second pick here. This is something that I think I've seen. It's a phenomenon, and I can't explain it. And I've benefited from it. So I'm not complaining, but I've seen this multiple times where there is this stunning woman, and I don't just mean that physically, but in every possible way, right? She's smart, she's funny, she's beautiful, she's the total package.
I know you're listening in headphones, so just blink 4 times if she's holding a gun to your left.
And then you look at the husband and you're like, but fucking why? Why? You once
Right.
told me, you're like, I questioned, like I couldn't understand why Steph would be with you.
Yeah, like the first, like, because I'd seen you through this, and then it's like the first time you posted a picture of you and Steph, and I was like, get the fuck out of here. Who is this? Quit it.
Yeah. Yeah, you paid her. You paid her. And we see that here, and yet somehow she's still deferential to him. And that is the thing I've never understood. Because I know plenty of guys who have wives that are way out of their leagues, but they're funny, or they're nice,
Right.
or they're this, or they're that. There's countless reasons why people decide to be together, and it's not my job to sit there and judge what those reasons are. I can, after a couple of drinks, sit back and be like, yeah, but fucking why? Like, are you hung? Like, what's the fucking reason? But
I'm
really,
gonna have to see that dick.
it's that's the thing, though, is that like you never really know. And here, I really don't get it. I'm with Tom Lowe here. I don't see it. I don't understand. Like, this was not the Anne that I knew in high school. What happened to the Anne that where was it? He said Cairo.
Yeah. Like you wanted to go to Cairo. Yeah.
What happened to that? Like, you're not even that person anymore.
So this is very much a small town phenomenon that I am exposed to on a regular basis. I won't drop any names here, but I will just tell a quick story that was the first time that I noticed this. I had a student in my class, and it's like the year starting, the mom comes in and she is stunning, just drop dead gorgeous. Right. And then, but the dad wasn't there. I eventually meet him, and he is just, I mean, he's a great guy, but just
You said it. Don't worry.
yeah,
Yeah,
there
you
we
said
go.
everything there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you're just, I was just like, I mean, this guy's like the American dream, right? Like he's just living in a small town, married the hottest chick he knew, and then just stayed there, possibly so she could never find out there were other people in the world.
Right.
I don't know. But I see it happen time after time, where what ends up happening, as best as I can put it together, because every one of these horribly mismatched couples from a small town like this all have the same story. And it always goes back to high school, when the guy probably peaked and she had not. And then, but then it's just like, well, we're here, and there's only 300 other people, so we've been doing this for a while, let's just stay there. And
But
they
might
just
as well.
Yeah, exactly. And they just don't get out of their small town and find out that there's a whole world out there of people that are equally attractive. They just end up falling for the person who's there, regardless of what they look like. And it's a bizarre thing, but it is very much a small town America thing.
And I know that has something to do with it, and they do a good job of portraying that here. I think where it was like he was there for me, and I think that's a real thing, and that happens in big cities too, but not to the degree that I have to imagine you see in smaller towns, and not that Tuscaloosa is a small town.
Oh well, no, this is the small town that I work in.
Gotcha.
which is a small town in the same county, but not in Tuscaloosa City.
Gotcha. Yeah. But she does, I think, such an amazing job of showing us so many different versions of Anne, and yet they're all true, because I think that Anne does in some way want to be the supportive wife who's there for her husband, who really truly loves the church.
Right.
He believes in that. Like it sickens him that he had to do what he had to do. And so I think that is part of who Anne is, because she loves him. And when you love someone, like you're willing to, like I'll sit through a Bravo Housewives or something like that because the wife wanted to watch it, like it's not hurting me. And if I know that it's making you happy, like, yeah, sure, I'll do that shit. Like there's things that, like, when you think about it, like there shouldn't be very much that you're unwilling to do. Right. So I think that is part of Anne too. And all the other things that we see of Anne discovering herself, it's awesome. It's amazing. And the whole while, what I never got from her, which is amazing, because I think I get this from almost every other portrayal of vampire I've ever seen, is there was never a sense of, I'm better than you now.
Right.
Like do this because I'm telling you to. Do this because you're in danger. Do this because I have the power now. It was always, I just want to be your equal, man.
Yeah.
Like I just want us to love each other and to respect each other. And I think that's such a real thing too. I see this really not as a vampire story. And it is a vampire story. And I think it's a good vampire story. But at its core, and I said this at the top of the show, this is a story about two people falling back in love with each other. And I think that's a beautiful story, because I mean it might as well be Before Sunset, and it works. It works in that way. And so even though, yeah, it's got a low budget, and I would have loved to have seen better lighting, I would have loved for them to use better cameras or better lenses, and I would have loved, but it's really well written, and it's really well acted. And I think that if you have a decent script and a great cast, man, you're fucking set.
Yeah, and I think that idea of so often a vampire movie turns into somebody gaining, immortality and ridiculous power, and it becoming, this massive ego trip. and it's here's what I can do now. And I think that what we got out of Barbara Crampton's performance is exactly what you said. It was never about, well, now I have this. And, she doesn't say, I like what I am now, because she has the power to take back all of these things that she wants. She doesn't like the thing that she is now because now she's going to outlive him and have 100 husbands or whatever. She likes what she is now because she's now feeling like his equal. Because this does very much in the beginning, while she is portrayed as a downtrodden woman because of all of this that's happened in her life, she's also portrayed as someone who never fought that.
Right.
She's portrayed as someone who accepted that as her lot in life and moved forward. And so it didn't become this idea of taking the power back. It became this story of acknowledging that you had power. And so, there's a really interesting feminine ideal there in the idea that it takes this much power for a woman to feel equal with a man. Right? Because you always hear the statistics on women make X percentage of what a man makes and things like that. So to be their equal, they have to make more, right? They have to. We're so accustomed as a society for the bar is always higher for women to reach the same level of status.
Right.
And so there's this idea that she had to become an immortal being of immeasurable strength to feel like her husband's equal.
Yeah.
He's a fat guy who snores, is bald, and is a preacher in a small town and wears tighty whities. And yet, to feel like his equal, she had to become a mythical creature of immeasurable power.
Yeah.
And then she's like, and now we're the same. Right?
Now I can approach you and say, hey, have you considered equality?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But that's where we are as a society, right?
Yeah.
That's what it takes. You get together 100 guys complaining about the same shit. And it's all over the news. Bunch of dickheads in Michigan throwing a hissy fit because they want a haircut, and it's all anybody can fucking talk about, right? But you get together 100 women complaining about a legitimate issue, and there's always going to be some dickbag on the news who's like, "I wonder what time of the month it is." Like it's a completely unobtainable standard to be equal. They have to rise above to be viewed as equal. And there's an amazing idea here within this, in the fact that by gaining all of this power, she didn't beat him up and turn him into her slave. She was just like, cool, can we do this whole thing 50-50 now?
Yeah. Well, and then there's a whole nother aspect to this that I think the movie doesn't gloss over, but I think it kind of folds into the rest of the story, which is rape. Like, when she comes home after she is attacked, that was a scene that I've seen the movie 2, maybe 3 times now, and each time it was more difficult to watch than the time before.
Yeah.
When she's looking at herself in the mirror and she's hyperventilating, man, that was tough to watch. Because again, this is something that, like, men typically don't think about this sort of thing. I go out and, like, I'm an amateur photographer. I love to take photos, and I'll walk around pretty much any part of Miami, with my camera and take pictures. And I never fear for my safety in a big city. My wife won't do that. There's no chance in hell. And I've said this before, not thinking about how, like, that's a totally gendered thing to say, where it's like, oh yeah, Miami's a safe place. And it is for me. Because not only am I a man, but in Miami, I'm in the majority. I'm a Latino man, you know?
Right.
And so like I look like every fucking guy out here. Shorter, but like every other fucking guy out here. She can't do that. She can't do that. And in any place, big city, small town, you know a woman who has been sexually assaulted.
Right.
And I don't know if she ever has been, but she played it like fucking wow. And anyone who says that, you know, horror is not real movie making, it's where people go to start out before they start making real movies.
Right.
All you have to do is watch that scene and you're like, nah, man, there is fucking talent in horror.
Yeah. Just real quick, shout out to Bam Bam watching us over on Instagram. I didn't realize that your comments aren't popping up on the stream that we watch. I just clicked over.
Oh no, they're not.
And so I'm seeing those now. He would like you to not sell yourself short. And
thank you, Andrew.
And yes, he then when you said you're just like any other man, just shorter, he just wanted to throw in a much shorter. So Bam Bam out here really pounding you on your height today.
In my defense, everyone is short compared to Bam Bam. All right, literally played Division I college football for Holy Cross. Like this is a big man. He
okay.
Yeah, he's also my work wife. I love you.
Okay.
Thank you, Andrew.
So so there's one more thing that we need to get into with this movie. Now, last month we were doing zombie movies, and every week we would take time to look at how the zombies were portrayed here. So in a section we're just calling vampire, because that's how we do it.
Mm-hmm.
Take me through what you think about vampires as presented in this movie, Dave.
In a lot of ways, this is one of the most traditional and conventional presentations of vampires, and I love it for that, because I think that classic Count Orlok look is great. Salem's Lot worked for a number of reasons, but part of that is the way that, is it Barlow? Was that his name?
Yes.
Looks in Salem's Lot. Like, it's fucking scary, man.
Yeah.
And the master is scary. And when we see Amelia, she's scary.
And we didn't even mention the fact that the master is played by Bonnie Aarons, who's
the amazing Bonnie Aarons,
the nun, in the Controverse.
Yeah, and she knocks it out of the park here. And I think that she manages to channel the suave charm of Lugosi and of Lee, while looking like the hideous monster that we see in Count Orlok and in Barlow, in Nosferatu and Salem's Lot. It's really interesting because, like, the offer that she's making is such an attractive offer.
Yeah.
And like Amelia herself, even though she looks like a crazed killer, when we see her as a vampire, there's a sexy edge to her. There's something, I don't know what it is that they did to her between we see her in the church and we see her in the mill, but she's turned into like a little sex pot there.
Yeah.
And it fucking works. So like that charm, that sex appeal is turned up for the vampires, and we see it for Anne too, because I don't know how they do it, but they make Barbara Crampton look plain Jane.
Yeah.
I thought it was impossible, but they do. And then when she's bitten and we see that transition in her, she turns into a fucking sex symbol. It's incredible. I don't know how at 63 years old, which is how old she would have been when this movie was made, she manages to look like this. She might be a vampire. I don't fucking know.
Yeah. This version of the vampire is it is my favorite. I love this portrayal of the vampire almost solely as an apex predator. I love the portrayal of a vampire who doesn't stealthily hunt. The vampire who doesn't need to because they're a fucking vampire.
Right.
Because what are you gonna do, you bumpkin? You know, I love not just cutesy little fangs. I love giant rows of jagged teeth. I love a vampire that is not a mindless killing animal, but with the instincts of a mindless killing animal. I adore apex predator vampire. Yeah, sexy vampire is cool, right? Vampire who just wants to love you and wants to make you part of his harem is cool and all of that. And it's not to take anything away from those, but man, the vampire that is just a fucking monster, the supernatural vampire. Right, that shout out Jeff, right? Like I know, he's like, yes, they mentioned it. I love a vampire that is portrayed as absolutely ruthless.
Yeah.
And whether it be because she's just kind of figuring it out, or whether it be because they have just completely succumbed to any and all madness that comes with this situation of being a vampire, and they're just living in that power. But those are the ones that scare me. The ones that show up and they've got claws and they're just going to shred you, because you know what? You bleed everywhere if you get cut. I don't need to bite your neck. I just need you to bleed. You know, the ones that just absolutely shred you because that's how much they can, just because they can, because why the hell not? And I love that idea of a vampire. And I love that this movie took that visual of a vampire and that mentality of a vampire, and yet still, like you said, managed to add a little sexy vampire in there.
Yeah.
They managed to add just enough where they didn't become, suave, smooth talking vampire, but just enough where you're like, okay, so it is still sexy to be a vampire. You're just also, the ultimate
killing
predator.
machine.
Yeah. Like that's just that I love. I love when vampires are portrayed like that, because I feel like that is when we fully get the idea of why these stories were so terrifying when they were first created. The idea, when you say vampire to most of America pre, Twilight, right now, a lot of them have read that. They have that idea of vampire. Pre-Twilight, when you said vampire, most people pictured Count Chocula and Bela Lugosi, right? Like that's who they had in their head. It was the funny talking Transylvanian guy. Everything was very angular, and he just had the two teeth, and he was ultimately kind of cute. When we see a vampire as portrayed in this movie, we're reminded of why the vampire is a scary story told in time immortal, right? It's forever been a story in the zeitgeist all around the world, because this idea that there's something that's actively hunting you, that's fucking scary. Vampires, believe it or not, vampires haven't always just been trying to fuck other people. Like you go back and you read old vampire stories, like, oh, they didn't want to have sex with anybody. They didn't care about that at all. And it's crazy.
They've kind of outgrown it.
Yeah, but they didn't need it. That's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, what are they, by hunting is how they reproduce.
Right.
Keep it in your pants. I don't want it. And so
fuck you. No, I want to drain you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I love that this took that idea of making the vampire outrageously scary again, because we need that. We need that in society right now. We need to be reminded that vampires are an ageless horror story for a reason. And you still go, okay, but yeah, it's a little sexy fine. Like, so I absolutely loved this portrayal of vampire. I think it was stellar.
Awesome. And this leaves us with just one thing left to do, which is to give this movie a rating. And for those of you that are listening for the first time or watching for the first time, you're probably going to be a little surprised. We don't use stars here. At Shiver, we believe that every movie should be rated against itself and not against other movies. So every movie gets a unique rating system. The metric that Daniel and I have discussed and agreed upon for Jacob's wife this week is going to be neck scarves. So, Daniel, out of a possible 5 neck scarves, how many neck scarves do you give Jacob's wife?
So, like I said, I planned on being just as surprised when we got to this part as everybody else, right? And I'm still going to be. So, to vamp for a second. I think that this movie delivered on a whole lot of things. Ultimately, it was very enjoyable. It had a lot of great themes. It had a lot of amazing moments. A character we didn't even talk about, just the sheriff guy, right? Had what was one of the funniest moments in the entire movie. Happens in like the first 10 minutes, and it's a throwaway line. He's sitting in the church with Jacob, and they're talking about the girl going missing, and Jacob's like, "Oh, well, her mom was sick and she wasn't feeling well." He just goes, "Well, goddamn." Oh, I'm sorry. Like that shit. Like I was like, just it has some really funny moments. It has some extremely tense moments when she comes home and she gets in the shower again. Very Lifetime movie, right? And so it does everything that it's trying to do well, but there are some things that it just couldn't do well, more than likely because of budget. And you mentioned them. The lighting of this movie is not great. There were plenty of scenes in this movie that are only lit by whatever happened to be shining through the windows at the time, and that doesn't always work, right? It does great at what it set out to do, but it definitely has its flaws. But I don't think that those flaws are enough to take away too much from the deaths that we got, this amazing portrayal of vampires, the themes that we've got here. So ultimately, I'm going to go with 4 neck scarves.
And that's exactly where I'm sitting, because I think the budget gets in the way of this movie being consistently amazing. Right. Because the writing's there, the acting is there, the directing is there. Because if you've got great actors, but you've got no director, guess what's happening? Fucking Attack of the Clones. That's what happens. All right. So, and Attack of the Clones has got a spectacular script. The plot of that really movie is so damn good, and yet it trudges along, and the sand, it gets everywhere. Like, what the fuck? Like, this is a movie that is really well directed. What it doesn't have is the money to be the movie that is there on paper, that is there in front of the camera. So, like, it occasionally has good lighting. It occasionally has good camera work. It occasionally has, the right lens for that angle of view that you want to have there. But it doesn't always. And that's what really gets in the way of this, is its budget, because I don't even feel like I need more special effects.
Right.
I just feel like the special effects needed to be done a little bit better. And not gorier, because there's lots of gore, but everything is missing the polish.
Yeah.
And I think it's weird, because it kind of sits in this realm where, like, it doesn't look low budget enough.
It's almost outdone by its greatness, right? It's because I was just having that thought. I was like, it's funny because, we do Return of the Living Dead, and we're like, yeah, it's so great because it's so campy and it looks so low budget and stuff like that. And it's because the whole package is that. The shining moments in this movie shine so brightly, it makes the dim spots even dimmer.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. So that's why it's going to get 4 neck scarves from me. It got 4 neck scarves from you. And so we're in agreement. 4 neck scarves for Jacob's wife. So if you stuck with us for the entire episode, thank you so much. Thank you to Andrew for chiming in there. I love you, bud. You're awesome.
He chimed in and said that I Am Legend had the type of vampires I'm talking about. He was like, or sorry, vampire zombies, whatever they were.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Exactly. So yes, thank you for coming in and spending some time with us. If you want to spend time with us outside of the show, we've got lots of social media where not me, it's Daniel. Daniel's our social media guy, where Daniel posts some amazing content. And you can always follow us at Shiver Pod. And you can just go to our website and get everything there.
Right. Shiverpod.com. You'll find links to all of those and our T Public shop where you can find some of our merchandise. If you ever pick any of that up, we'd love to get a picture of you and some of our merch posts up on all of our socials. And next week we will be continuing with vampires. We're going to go back a little bit further to 2009. We're going to go back to the other side of the globe where we were just about a month ago with Train to Busan, and we're going to land firmly in South Korea again, where we are going to be doing the 2009 film Thirst by the amazing Park Chan-wook. So super excited about that one. This is one that I have never seen, but have heard great things about. And I love the Vengeance trilogy. So I'm super excited for this.
Likewise, Old Boy is one of those movies that will stay with me forever. I don't think I will ever go more than a month without thinking about Old Boy.
Yeah.
So I am really excited to watch this one. And then we'll have one more, right? One more vampire, and then we'll move on to the next monster. I don't think we've decided on another monster.
We have. In May, we're going to be doing ghosts. We're going to be doing ghost movies in May.
And that's why Daniel handles everything. So on behalf of all of us here at Shiver, fright you very much.